Today, we're jumping into a mystery that's about 2,000 years old. Seriously, it's this incredible legal case from the Talmud that plays out just like a detective story. You've got conflicting testimonies, you've got subtle clues hidden in this ancient text, and a final deduction that is just brilliant, and we're going to unpack it all together.
So at the heart of all this is a really simple but, profound question. In a system where every single detail matters, what happens when someone makes a critical mistake? I mean, this is the very problem that had some of history's greatest legal minds scratching their heads. And it all kicks off with one specific ritual.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. We're in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. This is the absolute center of Jewish spiritual life. And there's this highly specific ritual happening, one that demands total precision and care.
The ritual we're talking about is called a sin offering. Now, this wasn't for some major, deliberate crime. It was for the unintentional slip-ups. The kind of mistakes that we all make. This offering was a way to spiritually hit the reset button to get right with God.
And right here is where our problem starts. The blood from this particular offering was supposed to go on the altar in the outer courtyard. But the priest, he makes a huge error. He walks right past the external altar and carries the blood inside the holy inner sanctuary, a place it absolutely was not supposed to be. So the question becomes, does that one mistake just ruin the entire ritual?
Now on this very question, two of the era's leading sages, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon, they look at the exact same set of facts and they come to completely different conclusions.
And wow, the disagreement couldn't be more clear. On one side, you've got Rabbi Eliezer, and he is strict. He says the second that blood crosses the forbidden threshold into the sanctuary, it's done, it's ruined, game over. But Rabbi Shimon says, hold on a second. He argues that just the intention to use it there isn't enough. The blood is only disqualified if the priest actually does the ritual in the wrong place, if he sprinkles it inside.
So how in the world can two brilliant minds look at the same law and see two totally different things? Well, the answer is in how they interpret the source code of Jewish law, the Bible itself.
All right, this is the verse they're both staring at. It says if blood is brought in to atone, the whole offering is disqualified. But the entire debate, literally the whole thing, hangs on that one little phrase, to atone. Does that mean the physical act of atoning or just the intent to do it?
Okay, so to define to atone, each rabbi uses a different kind of analogy. Rabbi Eliezer, he compares this case, which is about blood from an outside altar, to another rule about something forbidden from the outside, a person who isn't allowed to enter the sanctuary. That law kicks in the moment they walk in. So he says, our law should work the same way. But Rabbi Shimon thinks that's a bad comparison. He's like, no, you should compare an animal offering to another animal offering. Makes sense, right? And he finds a different verse about an offering where the phrase to atone clearly means the ritual after it's already been completed. So you see, the logic you start with completely determines where you end up.
Just when you think it's a simple, two-sided debate, a third opinion gets thrown into the mix from another sage, Rabbi Yehuda. And his testimony, well, it becomes the central clue to solving this whole puzzle.
Rabbi Yehuda introduces a brand new factor, intent. He says, look, if the priest just wandered in by accident, didn't even realize he was in the wrong place, the offering is totally fine. Which implies, of course, that if he entered intentionally, on purpose, the offering is disqualified.
And this is our central mystery. When Rabbi Yehuda says an intentional entry disqualifies the blood, what does he mean by that? Does he side with Rabbi Eliezer, that it's ruined the second the priest walks in with intent? Or does he side with Rabbi Shimon, that it's only ruined if he actually follows through and sprinkles the blood? His ruling, it doesn't say.
So to figure this out, the Talmudic detectives have to turn to a completely different legal discussion. They're hunting for a really subtle clue in the phrasing of another biblical verse.
And here is the verse they turn to. It's actually the same one Rabbi Shimon used earlier, but this time the key isn't the phrase to atone. Nope, the clue is hidden somewhere else in what looks like a tiny, almost insignificant grammatical quirk.
Did you catch it? The verse says, the bull of the sin offering and the goat of the sin offering. Why say sin offering twice? It could have just said the bull and goat of the sin offering. In the world of Talmudic analysis, there are no wasted words, ever. That repetition has to be there for a reason.
And what do you know, we find a record of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion on this. He argues that this extra sin offering is there to teach us something new.
that a certain law about ritual impurity applies not just to these specific offerings, but to all sin offerings. Now, the most important part of this is what he doesn't say. He uses the repeated words for his proof, leaving the phrase to atone completely untouched.
And this, my friends, is where the trap is sprung. Because another sage, Rabbi Meir, wants to prove the exact same law that Rabbi Yehuda does. But instead of using those repeated words, he uses the phrase to atone to make his point. And that shows us something crucial. The phrase to atone is available. It could have been used to teach this law about impurity.
And this brings us to the final brilliant deduction. Let's walk through it. First, Rabbi Meir proves that the phrase to atone is a perfectly valid source for deriving this impurity law. Second, we know Rabbi Yehuda derives that same law, but he deliberately uses a different part of the verse. So, third, the million-dollar question. Why? Why would he avoid using a perfectly good source? And the only possible answer is, he already needs that phrase for something else, something more important. And what could that be? It has to be for the exact same argument Rabbi Shimon made back in our original debate, that to atone means the action of sprinkling, not just the intent.
And there it is. By analyzing his reasoning in a completely separate case, we've solved our mystery. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Shimon. An intentional entry only ruins the offering if the blood is actually used in the wrong place. Case closed.
So, let's zoom out for a second. What does this incredible intellectual exercise actually show us? Well, it really reveals the fundamental method of the Talmud itself.
This whole detective story teaches us a few key things about this way of thinking. First, no detail is too small. A single repeated word can unlock an entire legal theory. Second, logic is built through analogy, by comparing one case to another to find the guiding principle. Third, and this is maybe the most important, you can't really understand what someone thinks until you understand why they think it. Their reasoning is everything. And finally, the goal isn't just about getting the right answer. The goal is the rigorous, logical, creative process of the argument itself.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This ancient method, this intense focus on textual details, on logical consistency, on the reasoning behind an opinion, what can it teach us about how we interpret texts, build arguments, and search for meaning in our own complex world? It's a pretty powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest truths aren't in the final answer, but in the beautiful, messy process of the argument itself. Thanks for joining me on this detective story.